Hey, what's up, guys? I promised a video on this subject, and I got a lot of positive feedback and a lot of curious people getting back to me wanting to know what it's all about. Um, Sometimes, I want to put posts out there in written form, but there there are some ideas that are just too big to develop by writing, or else I'll have to get into writing a book. So I think video format's the best. So I just wanted to share this with you guys, and I think it's super relevant. I think it's a subject that touches pretty much the entire population. So I'll do my best to keep it concise, and I hope it sparks a lot of discussions. So, how to take advantage of the economic recession as an entrepreneur, and why you don't have a choice, right? So, I want to get started off and go straight to the point. If we look at macroeconomic trends right now, we're experiencing a lot of inflation right now. And, the reason why is we had a global pandemic and there were measures taken by government and, the banks to protect against that. And so they started printing a lot of money. And the end result is that CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, demonstrates that there's inflation in prices happening, meaning that everything is getting more expensive. And let's not forget that CPI is a basket of goods in the economy. It's not all of it. It's not an aggregate. And so it gives us a sense, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what the total inflation is. But for now, we've reached levels of between, 6 and 8%. This is a US chart, but it was about the same in Canada. And this has a profound effect on the economy. And here I just want to give like a quantitative example, not using real numbers, but the math kind of works out the same. So imagine you have a base salary of $100,000, to keep it simple. You have a yearly increase of 2%. In the past, the 2% increase essentially tracked with the inflation rate of the economy. So, it felt like everything was pretty much stable. But when you have a CPI in the 8% range, your net buying power is down 6% per year, and that compounds. So your equivalent salary at the end of that first year is 94,000. And then, the next year you get your 2% increase, 8% CPI. Now it's down 12% net buying power. You're under 90,000. Run this experiment 5 years in a row at that high inflation, and you have lost about a quarter of your buying power, even though your salary numerically has gone up. Your actual buying power, your ability to purchase goods and services in the economy, food, gas, housing, you name it, have gone down. And this is happening to every single person right now. It's like there's no exceptions. And so what's the remedy to this? That's why I made this video. I want to show you guys how entrepreneurship is a remedy, and it's not really a choice, because I'll show you what the alternative is. But first, I want to come to a concept that I've been putting out there a lot that so few people are familiar with, and I get a lot of questions about what this means: anti-fragile. So I want to go into a little bit more depth on what it is and how this ties in to the subject that I'm talking about today, which is being successful in this economic recession that we're in, and that's going to last for the next 2 years, according to some experts. So let's start with fragile, right? I think we're familiar with that concept. What is fragile? Suffers or breaks from volatility. So I've got a good example here. I've got a glass of a mug of coffee, and if I drop it from high enough, it'll shatter. So I need to keep this thing safe. I definitely don't want to jostle it. I definitely don't want to subject it to stressors, because the chances are it'll break and it won't be put back together again. So what is fragile has more downside than upside. It seeks tranquility, and when there are mistakes, they're large and they're catastrophic. Now, what's resilient? Let's take an example of like a rock, right? You can throw a rock pretty high or far, and it won't really get damaged. It's resistant to damage, but it's not impervious, right? It's indifferent to tranquility and volatility. And in mythology, they use the example of the phoenix, right? Something that, it dies, but then it rises from the ashes exactly the same as it was before. Now, what is anti-fragile? It's the opposite of fragile, meaning that it gets stronger and grows from volatility. So randomness and chaos and change make it better. Okay, it's a new concept. So it has more upside than downside, seeks disorder, and small mistakes and benign mistakes, but the upside is massive. And in mythology, the if you're familiar, the Hydra is this creature that you can cut off a head, and then 2 or 3 heads come and replace every head. So I think it was Hercules who's cutting off all these heads, and eventually there's like 1,000 heads. So it gives you a good illustration of what anti-fragile is. But let's look at another representation of this. So let's look at 2 axes, right? There's stress on X, and there's gain, benefit loss on Y. So as the environment gets more stressful and more chaotic and more volatile, what is fragile breaks eventually, okay? Because it has more downside again than upside. What is robust will resist, but it'll still, end up lower than it started. What is resilient might adapt a little bit, and it'll end up higher than where it started. But what is anti-fragile just goes up, because volatility gives it opportunities to flourish, okay? And you can sort of see where I'm going with this, and how the economic recession is an opportunity to flourish if you have an anti-fragile approach to life and entrepreneurship. But before, I don't want to make this too abstract. I want to get practical. So I'm going to tell you guys about 2 examples of Joe and Jane. Okay, we'll start with Joe. Joe has a regular job, regular guy, probably works for a big private company, let's call it Facebook or the government or you name it, stable job. And every year, 2016, 2017, 2018, steady salary, not super high salary, but it's increasing 2% a year. And then there's an economic recession in 2020, and inflation's going up. So that 2% is now actually having diminishing returns. And now we're in an economic recession in 2023. Joe loses his job as part of job cuts at Facebook or at Meta or Google or the government or whatever it is, and doesn't recover from that because now the job market's closed. No one's hiring because uncertain times ahead. And now I want to tell you about the example of Jane, which is the opposite. Jane is an entrepreneur. Jane tries out different things. Some years go better than others. Some years are worse. You can see here by this volatility, because Jane is trying different things. She's experimenting. She's learning skills along the way. Jane is meeting new people. Jane is learning how to raise money. Jane is, as you can see, she's building this anti-fragile kind of, approach. And 2023 hits. Jane stumbles upon a huge problem, and because she built all those skills over time and she built the network and she knows how to raise money, she capitalizes on it. And 5 years later, Jane exits and she makes $10 million. So where Joe was fragilized, by the uncertainty, Jane was anti-fragilized. It's the first time I ever say that. And you can see why, because she had a lot of optionality. She had built all the skills necessary to deal with an uncertain environment, and she did a lot of experiments and she took advantage of them. Now, one more visualization that I think is important. So what is anti-fragile has more upside than downside. And this is a visualization. So the downside's capped, and you can see that the upside is about 2 or 3 times bigger. So it's like entrepreneurship is about taking pain and stress and discomfort for years. And when it succeeds, it's asymmetrically, it's an asymmetric success, right? It's way higher than if you'd have done it, in the more traditional way. And what is fragile is the opposite. It's, maybe there's a little bit of gain, but you're very sensitive to downside. Changes in the macroeconomic environment, political environment, you name it, like all kinds of environments. So that's a good visualization. But entrepreneurs can also be fragile. And in fact, I think the default state of entrepreneurship is pretty fragile, to be honest, especially in a time like decades ago when there were no support systems and there wasn't like a philosophy of how to do it right. But with the right tools, they can be anti-fragile. And today I want to show you this, how to benefit from uncertainty, like in an economic recession, like we're going into as an entrepreneur. But first, what's a fragile entrepreneur? A fragile entrepreneur jumps into any market on a whim. They build a product without validating the market. They spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars building product and doing things without actually making a sale. They launch only to find that there's no need in the market for what they built. They panic, they struggle, they try different things for a bit, but eventually they capitulate and they shut down the business. The anti-fragile entrepreneur does it differently. Again, they want to do things small where there's no chance of catastrophically failing. They pick a niche or a market that they're familiar with. They analyze the best and biggest opportunities in that market. They talk to hundreds of people in that market. They pitch different solutions. They solve the problems of the people in that niche, in that market, without building a product. They get positive signal and ideally sales, okay, without a product. They build a simple version of a product, they expand in the market, they improve the product, they expand in the market, and eventually they exit the business either on the stock exchange or it gets bought by another company. So that is what it means to be an anti-fragile entrepreneur. And, what I've been working on for the last 5 years, Institut Innovation Gatineau, the accelerator, we got to build a startup ecosystem from scratch. We got to build an accelerator from scratch and really see how it works. We've helped about 100 entrepreneurs. And so noticed patterns over time and came up with like this service offering that helps entrepreneurs be as anti-fragile as possible, because we understand that that's actually the secret. So what does that mean? So we train entrepreneurs to be better, teaching them to know themselves better, giving them mental tools, mental models to deal with complex business environment and an uncertain and volatile environment. We help entrepreneurs identify big market opportunities and accelerate time to product market fit. This is probably the most important one. The faster you get to market with a product that's needed, the less cash you burn and the quicker you start making sales. This is the single most important factor in all of it. And so we want to do that as fast as possible. But during that time, in order to limit startup expenses, we offer non-dilutive funding. What are different government programs, grants, and other types of things like that that can reduce your startup spend so that you're less fragilized. The more you spend, the more fragile you are. Raising capital at attractive terms. Once you actually do start getting sales and you can attract investor capital, you don't want to give away the lion's share of the equity in your company that you're building, because that's what you're going to exit with at the end. So to stay anti-fragile, you need to keep as much equity as possible, right? And you want to raise money, but at attractive terms. And then you want to maximize your operational effectiveness. So if you can be more efficient than the next business doing the same thing, then your results will be better, your sales will be better, your expenses will be lower. But operational effectiveness doesn't guarantee long-term success. For that, you need to build defensibility in business. You need to know how to defend those cash flows long into the future and increase your competitiveness and durability. And this is one of the last things that we work on is building network effects and scale economies and such. So this is what we do. And I just want to illustrate this another way, right? So I'll just move this aside, come over here. So we want to maximize business value by following the Startup Critical Path program, which is what we developed. And let's take 3 examples of startups. So a failed startup that does everything wrong basically starts their business and they never find product market fit. They never find their niche. They never build a product that has value, and they end up capitulating after burning a lot of cash. A typical startup that doesn't really get the help to go in the right direction, they just try a lot of random things. They eventually succeed, but first they burn a lot of money. They eventually turn it around and they start, generating, positive cash flow. But as you can see, the area under the curve is about the same as the area over the curve. So they ended up, finishing, making no money at all in the end. In an ideal startup, an anti-fragile startup, you want to get to market as soon as possible, having burned the least amount of money by, attenuating your startup expenses with grants and loans and things like this. And you want to raise money at attractive terms, operate efficiently, and build defensibilities to build a big, healthy business like this. So that's a very healthy business. And this is what we aim for at IAG. So I'm going to finish this video by inviting you guys to, if you are an entrepreneur and the economic recession scares you, I say that's okay, because there's ways of actually benefiting from that. And it's simply by doing more experiments, trying more things, looking for more opportunities while protecting your downside, and making sure that you are constantly evolving during this time and you're seizing opportunities. You're keeping your options open. And at the end of this month, the 27th, we're launching our first fully online validation program with hours of content, tons of dynamic worksheets that help you experiment as fast as possible. It'll really supercharge the way you generate hypotheses, test hypotheses in the real world, bring that in a feedback loop so that you can inform your next decisions. The startup that does this the fastest wins every time. And by spending the fewest amount of resources. So I added links in the description. If you have a startup or you're just exploring, but you're curious, feel free to apply. And that way we'll see if we are a good fit to help you guys out. And we'd love to build more startups in 2023. Our goal is to build close to 100 startups this year alone. So, we invite you guys to join. I hope that this video was useful. And I'm going to be sending a lot more like this because there's a lot more on the subject to go into, but I'll stop it here for now. All right. Have a good one. Cheers.